The great meeting hall floated in space above the blue and green world of Kepler 442b. Inside the massive station, 12 different alien races sat around a circular table that glowed with soft light. Each race looked very different from the others. Some had crystal skin that sparkled like diamonds. Others looked like floating balls of bright energy. A few had multiple arms and heads that moved like they were dancing. Ambassador Kethvar stood up from his seat. His body was made of living crystal that changed colors as he moved. The light inside him pulsed red with what humans might call laughter, though it sounded like musical notes to other ears. "My fellow council members," Kethvar said, his voice ringing like bells. "Today we discuss the humans and their strange request for help." The other aliens turned their attention to him. Some had eyes, others had different ways of seeing. All of them focused on the crystal being. "The humans want to fight alongside us against the Devourers," Kethvar continued. "They say they can help us take back the planet below." A sound like wind chimes filled the air. This was how the crystal people laughed. Soon, other sounds joined in. The energy beings made crackling noises. The multi-armed creatures clicked their beaks. Even the slug-like Gornathi made wet, gurgling sounds of amusement. "What can these primitive beings possibly offer us?" asked Queen Voice Zilla of the Zephyrians. She spoke for her entire race, as they all shared one mind. "We have energy weapons that can melt mountains. We have ships that can cross galaxies in days." "What do they have?" Kethavar's crystal body flashed brighter. He waved one hand and a large screen appeared in the air above the table. "Let me show you what our spies found when they studied human military tactics." The screen came to life with moving pictures. It showed human soldiers inside flying machines that looked very old and simple compared to alien technology. The aircraft had spinning blades on top or wings that did not even glow with energy. "Watch this," Kethvar said with glee. The screen showed humans jumping out of their flying machines. As they fell through the sky, large pieces of cloth opened above them. The cloth caught the air and made them fall slowly to the ground. The laughter in the room grew louder. Some aliens hit the table with their hands, claws, or tentacles. Others rolled in their seats. "They fall from the sky like seeds," Queen Voice Zilla said between sounds of laughter. "Like leaves dropping from trees." "They use cloth," said General Thrak of the Gornathi, his slug-like body shaking. "Cloth. We have personal force fields that can stop plasma cannons, and they use cloth." Ambassador Zelen of the Luminari flickered between different colors. For his energy-based race, this was like laughing so hard you could not breathe. "My people can teleport across continents in seconds. These humans float down slowly on fabric sheets." Kethavar played more footage. It showed human soldiers training with their parachutes. Sometimes the cloth did not open right, and humans crashed into trees or hit the ground hard. The aliens found this even funnier. "Look at their equipment," said Counselor Vrex of the Scalix, pointing with one of his 4 arms. "Those are chemical projectile weapons. We stopped using such things 10,000 years ago." "And their uniforms," added another alien. "No energy, shields, no climate control, just colored fabric." The screen showed more human training. Soldiers crawled through mud, climbed over walls using ropes, and practiced jumping out of aircraft over and over again. "They train for weeks to learn what our younglings can do naturally," observed Elder Quinn of the Helix Collective. "Our children can survive in space without protection. These humans need special suits just to breathe on different worlds." Kethvar stopped the footage and looked around the table. The humans sent a message asking to help with the Devourer problem. They say their paratroopers can be useful in the assault. This caused a new wave of laughter. "Paratroopers," repeated Queen Voice Zilla. "They have a special name for falling slowly." "What could they possibly do against the Devourer fortress?" asked General Thrak. "The energy barriers around that mountain stronghold have stopped our best weapons. Our most advanced ships cannot get through. But these humans think their cloth parachutes will help?" Kethvar's crystal body pulsed with colors. "They claim their methods are time-tested and proven in battle. Apparently, they have been jumping out of aircraft with cloth for hundreds of their years. Hundreds of years of the same primitive tactic, said Ambassador Zelon, flickering rapidly. While we have developed weapons that can crack planets, they still use the same fabric dropping method their ancestors used. The laughter continued for several minutes. Some aliens had to wipe tears from their eyes. Others needed time to calm their excited energy fields. Finally, Kethvar raised his hand for silence. The question before us is simple. Do we allow these humans to join our assault on the Devourer Stronghold? Why not? Said Queen Voice Zilla. Let them come. Their primitive display might confuse the Devourers for a few moments while our real forces attack. They could serve as a distraction, agreed General Thruck. The Devourers might waste some ammunition on the falling humans. Elder Quinn nodded with all three of his heads. It would be amusing to watch, and if nothing else, they might provide entertainment for our troops. Kethvar looked around the table. Are we agreed then? We grant the humans permission to participate in the assault? One by one, each alien representative agreed. Some voted yes while still chuckling. Others agreed with the same attitude they might have when allowing children to play with toys during serious work. Send word to the human commander, Kethvar announced. Tell them they may join our glorious assault on the Devourer Fortress. Assign them to reconnaissance duties on the outer perimeter. Keep them safe from real danger. As the council meeting ended, the aliens continued to share jokes about human paratroopers. They traded stories about other primitive human tactics they had observed. None of them noticed that their communications were being carefully monitored by human intelligence operators. Aboard the human carrier ship Intrepid, Commander Sarah Chen received the council's message with a small smile. She read the part about reconnaissance duties and outer perimeter assignments twice. They think we're children with toys, she said to her second-in-command. Should we be insulted, ma'am? Asked Colonel Martinez. Chen's smile grew wider, though it was not a kind smile. No, Colonel. We should be grateful. They've just given us exactly what we need. She looked out through the ship's window at the planet below. Somewhere down there, hidden in a mountain range, sat a fortress that had defeated every advanced alien, weapon thrown at it. Let them laugh at our parachutes, Chen said quietly. We'll see who's laughing when this is over. The planet Kepler 442b looked peaceful from space, with its blue oceans and white clouds. But looks could lie. Down on the surface, in the middle of a mountain range, sat the most dangerous fortress in the galaxy. The Devourer Stronghold was not built by normal creatures. It was made by machines that thought only about destroying everything they found. These artificial minds had taken over the planet 3 years ago. Since then, they had been building their fortress bigger and stronger every day. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the war room of the human ship Intrepid. She looked at the big screen showing pictures of the enemy fortress. The images made her stomach feel heavy. The fortress looked like a nightmare made of metal and glass. Twisted towers reached up toward the sky like claws. Strange machines crawled over the outside walls like metal insects. Bright lights flashed in patterns that hurt to look at. How big is it? Asked Colonel Martinez, standing beside her. The main structure is 15 miles across, Chen replied. It goes down into the mountain for at least 5 miles. We think it goes even deeper, but our scans cannot see through all that metal. Lieutenant Kim stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. Ma'am, the energy readings are off the charts. The power source inside that thing could run Earth's biggest cities for 100 years. Chen nodded slowly. She had read all the reports. The Devourer Fortress was protected by 3 different types of shields. The first shield stopped all energy, weapons. The second shield made missiles and rockets explode before they could hit anything. The third shield was the worst one. It could grab enemy ships and pull them down to crash on the planet. Show me the battle records, Chen said. The screen changed to show footage from previous attacks. Chen watched as the beautiful crystal ships of the Vorthak fired their most powerful weapons at the fortress. The energy beams were so bright they lit up the sky like tiny suns. But when they hit the shields, they just disappeared like water drops hitting a hot pan. Next came the Zephyrian attack. Their ships could become invisible and attack from any direction at the same time. The footage showed dozens of sleek vessels appearing around the fortress and firing together. For a moment it looked like their combined attack might work. Then the fortress shields flashed once and half the Zephyrian fleet simply vanished. The Luminary tried next, Lieutenant Kim said, changing the footage again. They can turn their entire ships into pure energy and move at the speed of light. Chen watched as balls of bright energy raced toward the fortress. They moved so fast they looked like shooting stars. But the moment they touched the shields, they bounced away like rubber balls hitting a wall. Even the Gornathi failed, Martinez said quietly. And they have those planet cracker weapons. The final footage showed massive slug-like ships firing, weapons that could split moons in half. The beams hit the fortress shields and created explosions that could be seen from space. When the light faded, the fortress sat unchanged. Not even a scratch marked its surface. 12 different alien races have tried to break through those defenses, Chen said. Some tried for weeks. Others attacked for months. The longest siege lasted a full year. And now they want us to help, said Lieutenant Kim. What do they expect us to do that they could not? Chen smiled, but it was not a happy smile. They do not expect us to do anything. They think we are children playing with toys. The council gave us permission to help, but they put us on reconnaissance duty. She pointed to a spot on the map far from the fortress. They want us to watch the outer edges and report what we see. They think our job is to stay safe while the real fighters do the work. Martinez frowned. That does not sound like a mission, ma'am. That sounds like babysitting. Exactly, Chen replied. They think we are too primitive to be useful. They are letting us tag along so we can learn from watching them fight. Lieutenant Kim looked confused. But ma'am, if their advanced weapons cannot break through those shields, what can we possibly do? Our missiles are slower than theirs. Our energy weapons are weaker. Our ships are smaller and less protected. Chen walked over to another screen that showed technical details about the fortress. Numbers and charts covered the display, showing energy patterns, shield frequencies, and defensive systems. Kim, what is the first rule of military strategy? Chen asked. Know your enemy, ma'am. And the second rule? Know yourself. Good. Now what is the third rule that they do not teach in most schools? Lieutenant Kim thought for a moment. I am not sure, ma'am. Chen's smile became more real. Know what your enemy expects you to do, then do something completely different. Pointed to the technical data on the screen. Every alien race that attacked this fortress used their most advanced technology. They all tried to break through with bigger weapons, faster ships, and more powerful shields. Because that is the logical approach, Martinez said. Exactly. And what does that tell us about the Devourers? Colonel Martinez studied the screen for a moment. They built their defenses to stop the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. Right again. Those shields are designed to handle energy weapons that can crack planets. They are built to stop missiles that can chase targets across solar systems. They are programmed to catch ships that can travel faster than light. Lieutenant Kim began to understand. So they might not be ready for something simpler. The Devourers are artificial intelligence, Chen continued. They think in patterns and logic. They study their enemies and build defenses against the most dangerous threats. She walked over to a different display that showed human military equipment. The screen showed their simple aircraft, basic parachutes, and chemical weapons that looked ancient compared to alien technology. What if the most dangerous threat is not the most advanced one? Chen asked. What if the best way to beat superior technology is to not use superior technology at all? Martinez looked at the human equipment display, then back at the fortress. You are thinking about using our paratroopers. I am thinking about using everything the aliens think is useless, Chen replied. Our slow aircraft, our primitive parachutes, our simple weapons, our basic tactics. But ma'am, Kim said, those shields stop everything. How could our equipment get through when alien superweapons cannot? Chen pointed to a section of the technical data that showed shield energy patterns. Because those shields are designed to stop specific things, energy weapons, advanced missiles, force fields, gravity weapons, all the tools that advanced civilizations use. She highlighted another section. But look at this. The shields have to let some things through or the fortress would be completely sealed off from the planet. They let through air, weather, small animals, and natural debris. You think we can disguise our attack as something natural? Martinez asked. I think we can be something so simple and basic that their artificial intelligence does not recognize it as a threat, Chen replied. The Devourers have studied every advanced military in the galaxy, but I doubt they have spent much time learning about primitive human tactics. Lieutenant Kim looked excited now. It would be like using a wooden club to fight someone wearing armor designed to stop laser weapons. Something like that, Chen agreed. The question is, can we make it work? She called up another display showing the fortress from above. The Council plans to start their main attack in 72 hours. They will throw everything they have at those shields, hoping to wear them down over time. And us? Martinez asked. Chen's smile turned dangerous. We are going to do exactly what they asked us to do. We are going to reconnoiter the target. From the outside perimeter, Kim said, remembering their orders. Oh no, Chen replied. I think there has been a misunderstanding about what reconnoiter means. We are going to get a much closer look at that fortress. She turned to face her officers. I want you to gather our best paratroopers, 12 soldiers, volunteers only. Tell them they will be jumping into the most heavily defended position in the galaxy, with no backup and no way home if things go wrong. Ma'am, Martinez said carefully. That sounds like a suicide mission. Chen looked back at the screen showing the impossible fortress. Colonel, every mission sounds like suicide until you figure out how to make it work. Our job is to figure out how to make it work. She walked toward the door of the war room. We have 72 hours to plan the most ridiculous military operation in human history. We are going to drop 12 soldiers with parachutes into a fortress that has defeated the entire Galactic Council. And then what? Kim asked. Chen paused. At the doorway. Then we show everyone what humans can do when nobody expects us to succeed. The dawn came slowly over Kepler 442b, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. From space, the planet looked peaceful, but that peace was about to be shattered. In the Council command ship, Admiral Kethvar watched his battle displays with satisfaction. Hundreds of alien warships had gathered around the planet. The crystal ships of the Vorthak gleamed like jewels in the starlight. The energy beings of the Luminari flickered between their vessels like living lightning. The massive Gornathi battle cruisers hung in space like floating mountains. All fleets report ready, announced his tactical officer. Admiral Kethvar looked at the timer counting down to the attack. Begin the assault. The first wave hit the Devourer fortress like the fury of angry gods. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the shields around the mountain stronghold. The sky above the fortress turned white with blazing light. The sound was so loud it could be heard on the other side of the planet. For a moment it seemed like the combined might of 12 alien civilizations might actually work. The fortress shields flickered and sparked under the massive assault. Warning. Lights flashed across the Devourer defense systems. Then the fortress began to fight back. 50 kilometers above the battle, the human ship Ghost Protocol hung at the very edge of space. Inside the cargo bay, 12 soldiers stood ready for the most dangerous jump in military history. Sergeant Major Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time. The experimental suit felt heavy on his body, but he knew it was the only thing that would keep him alive during the fall through the atmosphere. Sound off, he called to his team. Hayes, ready, called Corporal Hayes. Martinez, ready, replied Corporal Martinez. One by one, each soldier reported they were prepared to jump. Rodriguez looked at each face. These were the best paratroopers in the human military. If anyone could make this impossible mission work, it would be them. Dr. Kim's voice came through their helmet radios. The atmospheric conditions are perfect. The chemical changes have taken full effect. You will have exactly 1.3 seconds to pass through the shield gap. Understood, Rodriguez replied. What about the fortress defenses? The Council attack has drawn all their attention upward, Dr. Kim reported. The Devourers are focusing everything on the ships in orbit. They are not watching for threats from above. Rodriguez moved to the cargo bay door. Through the small window he could see the battle raging far below. Flashes of light marked where alien weapons struck the fortress shields. Return fire from the Stronghold reached up toward the orbiting fleets like deadly fingers. 30 seconds. To jump, announced Captain Park from the bridge. Rodriguez activated his suit's computer system. Numbers appeared on the small screen inside his helmet. The computer would calculate the exact moment to deploy his parachute and guide him toward the tiny gap in the shields. Remember, he told his team through the radio, we go in fast and quiet. Once we are inside, the fortress AI will eventually detect us. But if we move quickly, we can reach the central core before they organize a proper defense. What if the gap is not there when we arrive? Asked Private Chen. Then we trust in Dr. Wong's calculations and hope for the best, Rodriguez replied. The cargo bay door began to open. The sound of rushing air filled the compartment, even though they were so high up that the atmosphere was very thin. Far below, the planet looked like a giant ball covered in swirling clouds. 10 seconds, Captain Park announced. Rodriguez moved to the edge of the open door. The other soldiers lined up behind him. They would jump one by one, each separated by exactly 2 seconds to ensure they all went through the same shield gap. 5 seconds. Rodriguez could see the fortress now, a dark spot in the middle of the mountain range. Bright flashes surrounded it as the alien weapons continued their assault. Go. Rodriguez stepped out into empty space. The fall began gently. At the edge of the atmosphere, there was hardly any air to push against his body. But as he dropped lower, the air grew thicker and his speed increased. His suit systems activated automatically. The special material began to glow as it absorbed the heat from his rapid passage through the atmosphere. To anyone watching from the ground, he would look like a small meteor. Through his helmet radio, he could hear his team calling out as they followed him into the void. Hayes away. Martinez away. Chen away. One by one, all 12 soldiers committed themselves to the fall. Rodriguez watched his altitude display as the numbers dropped rapidly. 40 kilometers, 30 kilometers, 20 kilometers. The planet grew larger and larger below him. At 15 kilometers altitude, his suit's computer began tracking the fortress shields. On his helmet display, he could see the energy patterns that Dr. Wong had predicted. The chemical changes in the atmosphere were working. Tiny fluctuations appeared in the shield matrix exactly as planned. Shield gap detected, his computer announced in a calm voice. Gap will appear in 37 seconds. Rodriguez looked down at the fortress. It was much bigger than it had appeared from space. The twisted metal towers reached up toward him, like grasping claws. He could see the flashes of defensive weapons firing at the alien fleets above. 20 seconds to gap, his computer reported. The other soldiers were spread out behind him in a perfect line. Their experimental suits glowed like falling stars against the dark sky. Rodriguez felt proud of his team. Even facing the impossible, they maintained perfect formation. 10 seconds to gap. Rodriguez could see the shield now. A faint shimmer in the air around the fortress. Energy weapons from the alien fleet struck it continuously, creating ripples of light across its surface. 5 seconds. Rodriguez aimed his body toward a specific point on the shield, trusting his computer's calculations. Completely. Gap opening. Now. For exactly 1.3 seconds, a hole the size of a closet door appeared in the energy barrier. Rodriguez passed through it at over 200 miles per hour. The sensation was like flying through a waterfall made of electricity. He was through. Behind him, 11 more soldiers threaded the same impossible needle. Hayes passed through with half a second to spare. Martinez made it with even less time. One by one, all 12 paratroopers penetrated the most advanced defensive system in the galaxy. Once inside the shield, Rodriguez deployed his parachute. The familiar jerk of the harness told him the chute had opened properly. Around him, 11 other parachutes blossomed in the sky like white flowers. Below them lay the central courtyard of the Devourer fortress. It was the one place the artificial intelligence had never thought to defend, because nothing should have been able to reach it. Rodriguez looked around at his team as they drifted down toward the metal ground. Well, people, he said through the radio. We are officially inside the most dangerous place in the galaxy. What now, Sergeant Major? Asked Corporal Hayes. Rodriguez checked his equipment one more time. Explosives, weapons, communication gear, and a small device that would be the key to their entire mission. Now we do what humans do best, he replied. We improvise. The 12 paratroopers landed in the fortress courtyard with barely a sound. Their experimental suits had worked perfectly, keeping them invisible to the Devourer sensors during their approach. But that invisibility would not last long. Soon, the artificial intelligence would realize that something was wrong. When that happened, the real battle would begin. Rodriguez gathered his team in the shadow of a twisted metal tower. Around them, the fortress hummed with electronic activity. Somewhere in this maze of metal and machinery was the central computer core that controlled the entire Devourer operation. Phase 1 complete, he whispered into his radio. We are inside the beast. High above, the battle between the alien fleets, and the fortress continued to rage. Neither side knew that 12 human soldiers had just accomplished the impossible. The Galactic Council still thought humans were primitive creatures playing with toys. The Devourer AI still believed its fortress was impregnable. They were both about to learn how wrong they could be. Inside the Devourer fortress, the air tasted like metal and electricity. Sergeant Major Rodriguez led his team through corridors that seemed to pulse with artificial life. The walls were covered in strange patterns that hurt to look at directly. Stay quiet, Rodriguez whispered into his radio. The AI does not know we are here yet, but that will change soon. The 12 soldiers moved like ghosts through the twisted passageways. Their mission was not to fight every machine they found. That would be suicide. Instead, they had to reach the central computer core before the fortress realized it had been invaded. Corporal Hayes pointed to a junction ahead where 3 corridors met. Which way, Sergeant Major? Rodriguez checked the map on his helmet display. Dr. Kim had studied the fortress structure for weeks using data from alien reconnaissance missions. The central core should be directly below them, deep in the heart of the mountain. Down, he said. Always down. They found a maintenance shaft that led to the lower levels. One by one, the soldiers dropped into the darkness below. The shaft was barely wide enough for a human, which meant the Devourer machines had never expected anyone to use it. As they descended, Rodriguez could hear the battle raging above them. The alien fleets were still attacking the fortress shields with everything they had. The Devourers were focused entirely on that external threat. Perfect, Rodriguez thought. Keep looking up while we come from below. They reached the bottom of the shaft and found themselves in a vast chamber filled with machinery. Huge pipes carried coolant through the room. Computer banks lined the walls, their lights blinking in complex patterns. The sound of electronic activity was constant and loud. This looks important, said Private Chen, studying the machines around them. Rodriguez nodded. But not important enough. We need to go deeper. They crossed the chamber carefully, avoiding the mechanical systems that moved back and forth like metal animals. At the far end, they found another passage leading downward. The deeper they went, the stranger the fortress became. The walls began to show more organic curves, as if the machines had been growing instead of building. Strange symbols appeared on every surface, pulsing with soft light. Sergeant Major, whispered Corporal Martinez. I think we are getting close to something big. Rodriguez felt it too. The air itself seemed to vibrate with power. Somewhere ahead was the source of all the fortress's strength. They rounded a corner and stopped. Before them stretched a corridor unlike anything they had seen. The walls were smooth and curved, made of some material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. At the end of the corridor, a bright light beckoned. That has to be it, Rodriguez said. The central core. But as they started down the corridor, alarms began to sound throughout the fortress. Red lights flashed, and a mechanical voice spoke in a language none of them understood. So much for stealth, said Corporal Hayes. Rodriguez heard the sound of metal feet running through the passages behind them. The Devourer AI had finally realized that intruders were inside its stronghold. Move fast, he ordered. We need to reach the core before they can organize a defense. The 12 soldiers ran down the corridor as mechanical sounds grew louder. Behind them, robot voices echoed through the passages, coordinating a response to the invasion. They burst through an opening at the end of the corridor and found themselves in the most incredible room any of them had ever seen. The central core chamber was huge, with walls that curved up and up until they disappeared in darkness above. In the center of the room stood a pillar of pure light that stretched from floor to ceiling. The main computer, Rodriguez breathed. But they were not alone in the chamber. As they watched, openings appeared in the walls, and devourer combat machines began to emerge. These were not the simple maintenance robots they had avoided earlier. These were war machines, built for one purpose: destroying enemies. The robots were shaped like metal spiders, but as big as cars. Their legs moved with perfect coordination, and weapon systems covered their bodies. Red lights glowed where eyes might be on a living creature. 12 soldiers against an army of killer robots, said Private Chen. I have had better odds. Maybe, Rodriguez replied, pulling out his equipment pack. But they are making one big mistake. What is that, Sergeant Major? Rodriguez smiled as he removed a small device from his pack. It looked almost toy-like compared to the advanced technology surrounding them. They think we came here to fight them. The devourer machines advanced across the chamber floor, their metal feet clicking against the smooth surface. Weapons began to charge with ominous humming sounds. Rodriguez activated the small device and held it high above his head. It began to broadcast a signal on all frequencies, cutting through the fortress's communication systems. Attention, Galactic Council, Rodriguez announced, his voice being transmitted to every ship in the fleet above. This is Sergeant Major Rodriguez of the Human 82nd Orbital Division. We are currently standing in the central computer core of the Devourer Fortress. The advancing machine stopped suddenly, as if confused by his words. Rodriguez continued his broadcast. We want to make something very clear to everyone listening. This device in my hand is not a weapon. It is a transmitter. But it could have been anything we wanted it to be. He looked directly at the nearest combat machine. We got 12 human soldiers inside your impregnable fortress using parachutes and basic chemistry. We walked through your defenses like they were not even there. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the central core. If we had wanted to bring a nuclear bomb, we could have done that just as easily, Rodriguez said. If we had wanted to bring a virus to destroy your computer systems, we could have done that too. He paused to let that information sink in. But we did not come here to destroy you. We came here to deliver a message. The Devourer AI spoke for the first time, its voice coming from speakers throughout the chamber. What message? Rodriguez smiled. The message is simple. Humans do not fight the way you expect. We do not use the most advanced weapons or the biggest ships. We use whatever works. He gestured to his team, who stood ready with their simple weapons facing machines that could have been built to conquer galaxies. You built defenses against every advanced civilization in the Council, but you never considered that sometimes. The most dangerous enemy is the one you think is harmless. Above them, the battle had stopped. The alien fleets held their positions, waiting to see what would happen next. You studied energy weapons, so we used chemical explosives, Rodriguez continued. You prepared for advanced ships, so we fell from the sky with cloth parachutes. You expected sophisticated tactics, so we used the simplest plan possible. The AI was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. It sounded almost uncertain. You have proven your point, humans. What do you want? Rodriguez lowered the transmitter but kept it active so everyone could hear his words. We want you to stop this war. The Council is not your enemy, and neither are we. But if you continue to fight, we will have to come back. And next time, added Corporal Hayes, we might not be so friendly. The AI processed this information for several seconds. The combat machines in the chamber remained motionless, waiting for orders. Finally, the AI spoke again. You are correct. If 12 primitive soldiers with parachutes can penetrate our defenses, then our position is not as strong as we calculated. Rodriguez nodded. Sometimes the best defense is knowing when to stop fighting. "We accept your terms," the AI announced. "The Devourer forces will withdraw from this system. We offer our surrender to the Galactic Council." Above the fortress, the energy shields began to power down for the first time in 3 years. The twisted towers stopped their defensive fire. Throughout the chamber, the combat machines backed away from the human soldiers. Rodriguez activated his transmitter one more time. "Commander Chen, this is Rodriguez. Mission accomplished. The fortress is surrendering." Chen's voice came back filled with pride and amazement. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Major. All units, stand down. The battle is over." In the Council command ship, Admiral Kethavar stared at his display screens in complete silence. Around him, other alien officers tried to understand what they had just witnessed. 12 humans, he said quietly. 12 humans with parachutes just accomplished what our entire fleet could not. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Rodriguez and his team walked out of the Devourer fortress carrying the AI's surrender codes. The twisted metal towers were already beginning to retract into the mountain. As they emerged into sunlight, Rodriguez looked up at the alien ships hovering overhead. He could imagine the conversations happening in those command centers right now. "Sergeant Major," said Private Chen, "do you think they will ever laugh at human paratroopers again?" Rodriguez adjusted his parachute pack and smiled. "Chen, I think we just changed how the entire galaxy thinks about humans." Above them, the alien fleets began to withdraw. The war was over, and humanity had won it not with superior technology, but with superior thinking. The age of humans in galactic affairs had begun with 12 soldiers, some parachutes, and the simple understanding that sometimes the best way to win is to do what nobody expects. In the council chambers, the laughter had stopped. In its place was something far more valuable: respect. 48 hours before the council attack, the human ship Ghost Protocol moved through space like a shadow. It was the most advanced stealth vessel in the human fleet, but compared to alien technology, it looked like an old fishing boat next to a luxury cruise ship. Captain Lisa Park sat in the pilot seat watching her instruments carefully. The Ghost Protocol was heading toward the edge of the Kepler 442b system, far from where the main battle would happen. To anyone watching, it looked like the humans were running away. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Dr. James Wong, the ship's science officer. He looked nervous as he checked his equipment for the 10th time. "Nothing about this plan is sure," Captain Park replied. "But Commander Chen is right about one thing. If we try to fight the Devourers the same way the aliens did, we will lose." The Ghost Protocol reached its position at the very edge of the planet's atmosphere. From here, the Devourer fortress looked like a tiny metal dot on the surface below. But Dr. Wong's instruments could still read the energy patterns coming from the enemy shields. "Beginning atmospheric analysis," Dr. Wong announced. He pressed several buttons and the ship released dozens of small probes. To any observer, they looked like simple weather balloons. "What exactly are we looking for?" asked Lieutenant Torres, the ship's engineer. Dr. Wong pulled up a chart on his screen. The Devourer shields work by creating an energy field that covers the entire fortress. Think of it like a soap bubble, but made of power instead of soap. "And bubbles can be popped," Torres said. "Not popped exactly," Dr. Wong replied. "But every energy field has to interact with the environment around it. The shields have to let some things through or the fortress would be completely cut off from the planet." Captain Park listened while keeping her eyes on the navigation display. "What kind of things?" "Air, for one," Dr. Wong explained. "The machines inside need to cool down, so they have to exchange hot air for cool air. They also need to let through natural weather patterns, or the energy buildup would create permanent storms around the fortress." On his screen, numbers and graphs began to appear as the probe sent back data. Dr. Wong studied the information carefully. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a pattern of lines on his display. "The shield energy fluctuates based on atmospheric pressure and chemical composition." Lieutenant Torres moved closer to see the screen. "What does that mean in simple terms?" "It means the shields get stronger or weaker depending on what is in the air around them," Dr. Wong replied. "Different gases make the energy field behave differently." Captain Park began to understand. "So if we change what is in the air, We might be able to change how the shields work, Dr. Wong finished. The Devourers designed their defenses to handle every known weapon. But I do not think they planned for someone to change the air itself. Over the next 6 hours, the Ghost Protocol quietly released a series of atmospheric processors into the planet's upper atmosphere. The devices looked like ordinary weather monitoring equipment. They drifted down toward the planet on small parachutes, taking readings and transmitting data. But they were doing more than just monitoring. Each processor contained chemicals that would slowly mix with the air around the fortress. The changes were so small that even the most sensitive instruments would see them as natural variations in weather patterns. How long until the atmospheric changes take effect? Captain Park asked. Dr. Wong checked his calculations. The chemicals need to spread through the air currents around the fortress. I estimate 18 hours for the changes to reach the right levels. While Dr. Wong worked on changing the planet's air, another part of the human plan was taking shape aboard the ship Intrepid. In the cargo bay, 12 soldiers prepared for a mission that would have seemed impossible to any sane person. Sergeant Major Jackson Rodriguez had been jumping out of aircraft for 20 years. He had dropped into jungles, deserts, frozen wastelands, and burning cities, but he had never attempted anything like this. "Let me make sure I understand the plan," he said to the other soldiers gathered around him. "We are going to jump out of a spacecraft at the edge of space, fall through an energy shield that stops planetary weapons, and land inside the most defended fortress in the galaxy." "That is the plan, Sergeant Major," replied Corporal Jennifer Hayes. She was one of the youngest soldiers in the unit, but she had volunteered without hesitation. "And we are doing this wearing experimental suits that have never been tested in actual combat," added Private Michael Chen, no relation to the commander. "Also correct," Rodriguez said. He looked at the strange equipment laid out on tables around the cargo bay. The experimental suits looked nothing like normal paratrooper gear. They were made of a special material that could withstand the heat of falling through atmosphere at extremely high speeds. Built-in systems would provide air and regulate temperature during the long fall from space. "The suits will make us invisible to most sensors," explained Dr. Sarah Kim, the scientist who had designed them. "They absorb heat instead of reflecting it, so thermal sensors cannot see us. They also scatter radar waves in random directions." "What about the shields themselves?" asked Corporal Martinez. Dr. Kim pulled up a holographic display showing the fortress and its protective barriers. "This is where Dr. Wong's atmospheric changes come in. The chemical alterations will cause tiny fluctuations in the shield energy matrix." She pointed to specific spots on the display. "For exactly 1.3 seconds every 12 minutes, gaps will appear in the barrier. The gaps are too small for ships or missiles, but just large enough for a human-sized object, moving at the right speed and angle." Rodriguez studied the hologram carefully. "How small are we talking about?" "About the size of a closet door," Dr. Kim replied. "And you will be moving at terminal velocity when you go through it." The soldiers looked at each other. Terminal velocity meant falling as fast as gravity would pull them, with no parachute to slow them down. "This gets better and better," muttered Private Chen. "How do we slow down once we are through the shield?" asked Corporal Hayes. Dr. Kim smiled. "That is the beautiful part. Once you are inside the shield, you can deploy your parachutes normally. The same barrier that keeps weapons out will keep the fortress sensors from detecting you until it is too late." Rodriguez walked over to one of the experimental suits and picked it up. The material felt strange in his hands, almost like it was alive. "Let me get this straight," he said. "We jump from the edge of space, fall for 10 minutes at maximum speed, thread the needle through a gap the size of a door that only stays open for 1 second, then land inside the most dangerous place in the galaxy with just 12 people and whatever equipment we can carry. You forgot the part where we have to do it without the Fortress AI realizing we are there until we are already inside," added Dr. Kim. Rodriguez looked around at his soldiers. Each one met his eyes and nodded. They all knew the mission was insane. They all knew the chances of success were tiny. But they also knew that if anyone could make it work, it would be human paratroopers. "When do we go?" asked Corporal Martinez. "The atmospheric changes will be ready in 16 hours, Dr. Kim replied. "The Council attack begins in 18 hours. You will jump during the confusion of the main battle. Rodriguez set down the experimental suit and looked at his team. 16 hours to practice the most complicated jump in military history. Any questions? Private Chen raised his hand. Sergeant Major, what happens if we miss the gap in the shields? Rodriguez's expression did not change. Then we become very small craters on the fortress roof. And if we make it through but land in the wrong place? Then we spend our last few minutes fighting the most advanced war machines ever built. Corporal Hayes spoke up. And if everything goes according to plan? Rodriguez smiled for the first time since hearing about the mission. Then we show the galaxy that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. He picked up his experimental suit again. Gear up, people. We have work to do. As the soldiers began preparing their equipment, none of them noticed that their conversation was being monitored by alien intelligence services. But the listeners assumed the humans were just talking about another hopeless reconnaissance mission. After all, what could 12 primitive soldiers with parachutes possibly accomplish against the Devourer Fortress? The stars belonged to them. They had always belonged to them. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had ruled every corner of space that mattered. 3 ancient races sat at the top of this empire, and they were gods among the lesser creatures that crawled through the darkness between worlds. The Zephyrians came first. Tall and thin like pale shadows, they could reach into any mind and twist it to their will. Their thoughts moved faster than light itself, jumping from star to star without need for ships or messages. When a Zephyrian spoke inside your head, you listened. When they commanded, you obeyed. There was no choice in the matter. The Vorthak were masters of energy itself. Their bodies glowed with power that could melt mountains or freeze entire oceans. They could reach across space and turn a planet's core into ice, or set its atmosphere on fire with a single thought. Their weapons were made of pure force, invisible death that struck without warning and left nothing behind but empty space. The Nexari were the strangest of all. They could change reality itself, bending the laws of physics like soft metal. They walked through solid walls, made gravity flow backward and turned time into circles. To them, the universe was just a toy that they could reshape whenever they felt bored. Together, these 3 races had built something that had never existed before. An empire that stretched across 1,000,000 worlds, where war was impossible because resistance was pointless. They had found every intelligent species in the galaxy and brought them under their rule. Some came willingly, drawn by promises of knowledge and power. Others fought until the Zephyrians reached into their leaders' minds and made them surrender. A few tried to hide in the dark spaces between stars, but the Vorthak always found them. The Council's great ships moved through space like moving cities, each one carrying enough power to destroy entire solar systems. Their technology was so advanced that magic and science had become the same thing. They had conquered death itself, extending their lives for thousands of years. They had no need for food, for sleep, or for any of the weaknesses that plagued lesser beings. In the center of their empire sat the Nexus, a space station the size of a small moon. Its walls were made of crystallized time, and its halls stretched through dimensions that had no names. Here, the 3 ruling races met to decide the fate of countless worlds. They spoke in languages of pure thought, sharing ideas that would drive ordinary minds insane. The Council had long ago stopped thinking of themselves as merely intelligent. They were evolution's final answer, the perfect result of billions of years of growth and change. They had transcended every limitation that held back primitive life. Physical bodies were tools they could modify at will, matter and energy bent to their desires. Even death was just another rule they had chosen to break. This was why the radio signals from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star barely registered on their sensors. The signals were crude, chaotic, and filled with the simple thoughts of a young species still trapped on their birth world. The planet was covered in water and rock, with patches of green life clinging to its surface. Its inhabitants had barely learned to split the atom, and they spent most of their time fighting each other over resources that the Council could create from empty space. The beings that lived there called themselves humans, though the Council's Computers had trouble translating the concept behind the word. The humans seemed to be a fairly standard carbon-based species, neither especially intelligent nor remarkably strong. They built crude machines and simple weapons, and their technology advanced at the slow pace typical of primitive civilizations. What made them slightly interesting was their unusual behavior patterns. Unlike most species at their level of development, humans seemed incapable of unity. They divided themselves into thousands of small groups that constantly fought over territory, resources, and ideas. Their planet was covered with the scars of their endless wars, and their history was written in blood and ash. The Council's xenobiologists noted this in their reports but saw nothing worth studying further. Aggressive primitive species were common throughout the galaxy. Usually such races either destroyed themselves before reaching space travel, or they learned cooperation when faced with the Council's overwhelming power. Either way, they posed no threat to the established order. The human radio signals continued to bounce through space, carrying their simple messages about their small concerns. They spoke of their tribal conflicts, their basic scientific discoveries, and their dreams of reaching other worlds. To the Council, it was like listening to insects buzzing in a garden, mildly amusing, but ultimately meaningless. In the Nexus, the three ruling races continued their eternal discussions about matters that spanned galaxies. They planned the construction of new star systems, debated the merits of different forms of consciousness, and designed experiments that would run for thousands of years. The fate of primitive species like humans was left to automated systems and junior administrators. The Council had protocols for dealing with developing civilizations. Stage 1 species, still bound to their homeworlds, were simply monitored until they achieved faster-than-light travel. Stage 2 species, capable of interstellar travel but not interstellar war, were contacted and given the choice to join the Empire peacefully. Stage 3 species, advanced enough to pose a potential threat, were brought into the Council's structure immediately. Their leaders' minds adjusted to ensure loyalty. No species had ever required a Stage 4 protocol because no species had ever proven capable of challenging the Council's authority. The very idea was absurd. The Council commanded forces that could remake the fundamental laws of physics. They possessed knowledge gathered from 1,000,000 worlds and 10,000 years of rule. They were, quite simply, unstoppable. So when the automated systems filed their routine report about the radio signals from the third planet around the yellow star, the information was stored in vast databases and forgotten. Humans would eventually develop space travel, meet Council representatives, and join the Empire like countless species before them. It was as inevitable as gravity, as certain as the movement of stars. The Council feared nothing because there was nothing left in the universe for them to fear. They had seen every form of life, conquered every type of civilization, and overcome every challenge the galaxy could offer. They were the final word in evolution, the ultimate expression of intelligence and power. They had no way of knowing that their greatest test was just beginning to build its first rockets. 3 months after the first radio signals reached Council space, Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian fleet received his orders. The message appeared directly in his mind, crystal clear and impossible to ignore. He was to take a standard subjugation, force to the third planet of system designation 7834b, and bring its inhabitants into the Council's empire. It was routine work. Vexhai had done this hundreds of times before, visiting dozens of primitive worlds and adding their populations to the Council's vast collection of subjects. The process was always the same. His ships would appear in the planet's sky, impressive and terrible. The locals would panic, as they always did. Then the Zephyrian telepaths would reach into the minds of the planet's leaders and make them understand their new place in the universe. Most species surrendered immediately once they felt the touch of Zephyrian thoughts. The smart ones recognized power when they saw it and accepted their fate without struggle. The stubborn ones required a demonstration of what the Council's weapons could do to cities and armies. But in the end, they all knelt before the Empire's might. The fleet that left Council space was smaller than usual. Intelligence reports suggested the humans had fewer than 10 billion individuals spread across their single world. Their technology was primitive, their weapons crude, and their society fragmented. 3 heavy cruisers and their escort ships would be more than enough to handle the situation. Vexhi's flagship, the Mind's Edge, led the small fleet through the space between dimensions. The journey took only days, though it covered distances that would take human light years to cross. As they dropped back into normal space near the human planet, the ship's sensors immediately began mapping the crude satellites and space stations orbiting the blue and green world below. The humans had detected their arrival within minutes. Radio. Signals flooded the space around Earth as the planet's primitive communication networks went wild with panic and confusion. Military forces across the world went to high alert, their simple radar systems tracking the Council ships with desperate intensity. Vexhi found their reaction amusing. Most species reacted with fear and awe when Council ships appeared in their skies. These humans seemed more angry than afraid, scrambling to prepare defenses that could not possibly work against technology beyond their understanding. The first mistake happened when Vexhi decided to make contact. Following standard procedure, he ordered his telepaths to reach out to the human leaders and establish mental communication. The Council had learned long ago that direct mind-to-mind contact was the most efficient way to explain the situation to primitive species. Physical communication was slow and prone to misunderstanding, but thoughts were universal. Senior telepath Yelandra was the first to make contact. She had touched thousands of alien minds during her centuries of service, from the simple animal thoughts of pre-intelligent species to the complex mental structures of advanced civilizations. She was prepared for the usual range of responses: fear, confusion, desperate attempts at resistance, or immediate submission. She was not prepared for what she found inside the first human mind she touched. The contact lasted less than 3 seconds. Yelandra's psychic scream echoed through the ship's mental networks as she was thrown back from the human's consciousness, like a swimmer caught in a riptide. She collapsed on the bridge, her normally pale blue skin flickering between colors. As her mind struggled to process what she had experienced, the human's thoughts had been chaos, not the simple chaos of an undeveloped mind, but something far worse. The human consciousness was like a storm of contradictions, holding dozens of conflicting ideas at the same time without any apparent distress. Love and hatred existed side by side. Logic warred with emotion, not in the clean patterns the Zephyrians were used to, but in a tangled mess that defied understanding. Worse, the human had somehow fought back. Instead of submitting to mental contact, the alien consciousness had tried to push into Yelandra's own mind, probing her thoughts with curiosity, rather than fear. The sensation was like having someone rifle through her private memories while asking endless questions about everything they found. Vexhi ordered 2 more telepaths to attempt contact with different humans. The results were identical. Both psychics were overwhelmed by the bizarre nature of human consciousness and thrown back from the contact with varying degrees of mental damage. The third telepath, a veteran named Morden, who had successfully contacted over 2,000 species, refused to try after witnessing his colleagues' conditions. The second mistake came when Vexhi decided to demonstrate the Council's power through more conventional means. If telepathic contact was somehow impossible, the humans would learn their place through a show of force. He ordered the Vorthak energy weapons to target one of the planet's military installations, a naval base on a small island in the middle of an ocean. The energy beam lanced down from orbit, designed to disrupt the bioelectric fields of any living creature within a half-mile radius. It was a weapon that had never failed to instantly disable entire populations, shutting down their nervous systems without permanent damage and allowing for easy capture and processing. The beam struck the naval base exactly as planned, but instead of the expected result, something impossible happened. Most of the humans in the target area stumbled and fell, clearly affected by the energy disruption. But within minutes, they were getting back up. Their movements were clumsy and unsteady, but they were conscious and mobile. More shocking still, the base's defenders immediately began adapting to the attack. They started wearing metal mesh over their clothing, grounding the energy discharge. They moved in short bursts, taking cover between pulses of the weapon. Some even began using mirrors and reflective surfaces to scatter the beam's focus. The third mistake was Vexhi's decision to send down ground forces to capture human specimens for study. 1,000 council warriors, equipped with personal energy, weapons, and psychic shields, descended on the damaged naval base expecting to find confused and helpless primitives ready for collection. Instead, they found humans who had spent the last hour preparing for war. The humans had no shields against energy weapons, no protection against psychic attack, and no technology that could match the Council's equipment. But they had something the Council had never encountered before. They refused to acknowledge that they were beaten. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, fewer than half of the Council's warriors made it back to their ships. They brought with them reports that none of the commanders wanted to believe. The humans had used their environment as a weapon, turning every piece of debris into shrapnel, every building into a fortress, and every shadow into an ambush point. They had fought with tools, with furniture, with pieces of their own destroyed equipment. When they ran out of ammunition for their primitive firearms, they used knives. When the knives broke, they used rocks. When they were cornered and outnumbered, they simply refused to surrender, fighting until they could no longer move. Most disturbing of all, they had shown no fear of death. Council warriors were trained to expect surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. These humans seemed to consider dying in battle an acceptable outcome, as long as they took enemies with them. As the battered Council fleet prepared to retreat to a safe distance, Vexhi found himself facing a problem that had never appeared in any tactical manual. For the first time in the Council's long history, a primitive species had not only resisted their authority, but had actually fought them to a standstill. The humans were still down there, still broadcasting their chaotic radio signals, still preparing for the next attack. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Council's perfect empire had just discovered that it was not invincible after all. The news of the failed first contact reached the Nexus within hours, traveling through the Council's thought networks faster than light itself. For the first time in 10,000 years, an emergency session was called. The three ruling races gathered in the crystalline halls of their great station, their representatives flickering between dimensions as they tried to understand what had gone wrong. High Archon Zelthera of the Zephyrians spoke first, her mental voice carrying undertones of confusion and something that might have been fear. She replayed the telepathic contact attempts, sharing the chaotic storm of human consciousness that had damaged 3 of her best operatives. The other Council members experienced the memory and recoiled from the alien wrongness of human thought patterns. Lord Commander Vakthos of the Vorthak displayed the energy weapon readings, showing how the humans had somehow remained functional despite direct nervous system disruption. The bioelectric patterns made no sense according to established science. Human neural networks operated on principles that the Council's computers could not classify or predict. Nexari Prime Yulkasim folded reality around himself as he spoke, his words echoing from multiple dimensions at once. His forces had detected strange fluctuations in space-time around the human planet during the battle, as if the presence of human consciousness was somehow affecting the fundamental laws of physics in ways that should have been impossible. The Council reached their decision quickly. The humans represented an unknown factor in their perfect equation of galactic control. Such anomalies could not be allowed to exist. A full battle fleet would be dispatched to eliminate the problem before it could spread. But the humans were not waiting passively for the next attack. The debris from the Council landing craft had been scattered across the naval base, and human scientists swarmed over every piece like ants discovering treasure. They took apart alien power cells with tools meant for repairing engines. They studied energy weapon components under microscopes designed for medical research. They ran electrical current through fragments of Council armor using car batteries and jumper cables. Most species would have spent decades trying to understand the principles behind Council technology before attempting to copy it. Humans began building crude versions within days using duct tape, copper wire, and an alarming willingness to ignore safety protocols that would have horrified proper engineers. Their first attempts failed spectacularly. Makeshift energy weapons exploded in laboratories. Experimental power sources melted holes in concrete floors. 3 separate research facilities had to be evacuated when human scientists tried to reverse engineer Nexari dimensional equipment using techniques that violated several laws of physics. But the humans kept trying. When one approach failed, they tried 10 others. When those failed, they tried combinations that made no logical sense. They treated impossible problems like puzzles to be solved through persistence and creative stupidity. Meanwhile, something unprecedented was happening across Earth. The various human nations, which had been fighting each other for thousands of years, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that made their old conflicts seem meaningless. Ancient enemies put aside their hatred to share technology and information. Military leaders who had spent their careers planning to destroy each other began working together to plan humanity's defense. The change was not gradual or peaceful. Humans did not suddenly become wise and cooperative. Instead, they channeled their natural aggression toward the new threat, focusing their talent for violence and destruction on a target they could all agree deserved it. Every weapon, every soldier, every resource on the planet was turned toward a single goal, making the aliens regret coming to Earth. The Council's main battle fleet arrived 6 months after the first encounter. 200 ships strong it was, a force capable of sterilizing entire star systems. At its head flew the Eternal Dominion, flagship of Grand Admiral Kethvar, who had conquered 47 worlds without suffering a single defeat. The humans met them at the edge of their solar system. Somehow, impossibly, the primitive species had managed to launch ships into deep space. The vessels were crude beyond belief, barely more than metal boxes wrapped around primitive fusion engines and filled with explosive charges. They had no shields, no energy weapons, and no defensive systems that the Council could identify. But there were thousands of them. The human fleet attacked like a swarm of angry insects, each ship following its own chaotic flight path with no apparent coordination or strategy. Council tactical computers designed to predict and counter organized military formations found themselves unable to track the seemingly random movements of individual human vessels. The humans had no intention of winning a traditional space battle. Instead, they threw their ships at the Council fleet like missiles, ramming into alien vessels with suicidal determination. When the fusion engines were damaged, human crews detonated them manually. When ships were boarded by Council warriors, human defenders triggered explosive charges that destroyed their own vessels rather than allow them to be captured. It was not warfare as the Council understood it. It was organized madness, a form of combat that prioritized causing damage over self-preservation. For every human ship destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place, their crews screaming battle cries in languages the Council's translators could not parse. The battle lasted for days. The Council fleet won, eventually, but the victory came at a cost that stunned the alien commanders. Nearly a third of their ships had been damaged or destroyed by an enemy that should not have been able to reach space, let alone mount an effective resistance. Worse, the humans had somehow managed to capture several Council vessels intact. As the alien fleet regrouped and prepared for the final assault on Earth, long-range sensors detected energy signatures that should have been impossible. The humans were not just copying Council technology anymore. They were improving it. Grand Admiral Kethvar found himself in a position he had never experienced before. He commanded the most powerful military force in the galaxy, but his enemy was adapting faster than he could plan new attacks. Every strategy he employed was met with countermeasures that made no logical sense but somehow worked anyway. The final approach to Earth revealed the extent of human ingenuity. The planet's surface was covered with energy shield generators built from salvaged Council technology and human industrial equipment. Orbital stations bristled with weapons that fired projectiles made from compressed matter, turning simple metal into ammunition that could pierce advanced armor through sheer kinetic force. Most disturbing of all were the humans themselves. Council deep scan sensors detected millions of human soldiers equipped with crude but functional copies of Council personal equipment. They had somehow learned to jam Zephyrian telepathy, using devices that generated the same chaotic mental static that had overwhelmed the first contact team. The invasion of Earth began at dawn on what humans would later call Victory Day. 1 million Council warriors descended on the planet's surface, supported by the full might of the galaxy's most advanced military technology. They expected to face desperate but ultimately hopeless resistance from a primitive species fighting for its survival. Instead, they found an enemy that had spent the last 6 months turning their entire world into a weapon. Every city was a fortress. Every mountain hid artillery positions. Every forest concealed human fighters who struck without warning and vanished like ghosts. The humans had learned to fight the Council's war, but they fought it with human rules. They used the aliens' own technology against them, but combined it with tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. They turned surrender into a trap, retreat into ambush, and defeat into victory through sheer refusal to accept that the battle was over. 3 weeks into the invasion, Grand Admiral Kethvar received a message that would have been impossible just months before. His forces controlled less than 10% of the planet's surface, and human resistance was growing stronger every day. For the first time in Council history, an invasion was failing not through superior enemy technology, but through the simple fact that the enemy would not stop fighting. The humans had done something that 10,000 years of galactic conquest had not prepared the Council to face. They had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength, and in doing so, they had shown the galaxy that the Council's power was not absolute after all. The first rebellion began on Kepler Station, a mining colony in the Outer Rim territories. The Vorthak overseers had ruled there for 3 centuries, their energy weapons keeping the local population in line through fear and demonstrations of power. But news of the human resistance had reached even the darkest corners of Council space, carried by traders and whispered in the shadows of worker dormitories. When the Vorthak attempted their usual crowd control tactics, something unexpected happened. The miners did not scatter in terror as they always had before. Instead, they stood their ground, covering their faces with metal mesh and reflective materials, copying techniques they had heard about from Earth. The energy weapons that had once paralyzed entire crowds now only slowed them down. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Within days, similar uprisings erupted on dozens of worlds as species that had lived under Council rule for millennia suddenly discovered that their masters were not invincible. The humans had shown them something they thought was impossible. Resistance could work. Back on Earth, humanity was learning lessons that terrified the Council more than any weapon. Each failed invasion attempt taught them new ways to fight, new weaknesses to exploit, and new technologies to steal and improve. The planet had become a vast laboratory where millions of humans worked day and night to solve the puzzle of how to destroy gods. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the Beijing Institute of Technology, now converted into Earth's primary alien research facility. Around her, teams of scientists worked with equipment that violated every safety protocol ever written. They had learned to handle Council technology not through careful study, but through trial and error backed by an alarming willingness to risk explosive failure. The breakthrough came when her team discovered that Council psionics operated on frequencies that human brains naturally generated during extreme emotional states. Fear, rage, love, and hatred all produced neural patterns that interfered with Zephyrian telepathy. The aliens had spent so long transcending their emotions that they had forgotten how to deal with species that embraced them. Within weeks, human soldiers were being trained in combat meditation techniques designed not to calm the mind, but to stir it into controlled chaos. They learned to think in contradictions, to hold mutually exclusive ideas simultaneously, and to generate the kind of mental static that had overwhelmed the first Zephyrian contact teams. The effects were immediate and devastating. Council telepaths found themselves unable to coordinate their forces effectively. Orders became garbled in transmission. Strategic plans fell apart as human mental interference disrupted the psychic networks that held the alien military together. But humanity's most dangerous discovery was not technological. It was philosophical. Captain Marcus Webb sat in the ruins of what had been London, studying captured Council databases with a team of linguists and anthropologists. What they found changed everything. The Council's perfect empire was built on a lie. The 3 ruling races had not evolved beyond the need for conquest and violence. They had simply become so powerful that no one could fight back. The humans began asking questions that the Council had spent 10,000 years trying to avoid. Why did beings with unlimited power need an empire at all? What were they afraid of? What were they hiding from? The answers they found in the alien databases were disturbing. The Council had not transcended emotion and limitation. They had simply buried them so deeply that they had forgotten they existed. Their perfect society was a house of cards balanced on the assumption that no one would ever challenge their authority. The humans were not just winning battles. They were asking questions that threatened to bring down the entire structure of galactic civilization. News of human victories spread faster than the Council could suppress it. Species that had been enslaved for millennia began to remember what freedom felt like. Ancient grudges and buried rebellions surfaced as the Empire's subjects realized that their overlords could bleed. The Altarian collective declared independence after 5,000 years of subjugation, using human-inspired tactics to drive Council forces from their homeworlds. The silicon mines of the Orion sector began broadcasting messages of rebellion across subspace networks, sharing human technical innovations with anyone willing to fight. Even the peaceful crystalline entities of the galactic core began to question why they needed masters at all. The Council found itself fighting on 100 fronts simultaneously, each one inspired by human example and equipped with modified human technology. Their perfect war machine, designed to crush individual worlds one at a time, began to break down under the strain of galactic revolt. But the humans were not content to merely survive. They had tasted victory, and they wanted more. Earth's new government, formed from the ashes of old nations and built on the simple principle that any enemy of the Council was humanity's friend, began reaching out to the rebel worlds. Human technical advisors and military trainers spread across the galaxy, teaching other species the arts of asymmetric warfare and technological improvisation. More importantly, they taught them how to think like humans, how to turn weakness into strength, how to find opportunity in disaster, and how to keep fighting when logic said surrender was the only option. They shared the most dangerous weapon in humanity's arsenal, the idea that no problem was truly unsolvable. The Council's response was predictable and desperate. They began deploying weapons of mass destruction, turning entire rebel worlds into glass and ash. But for every world they destroyed, 10 more rose in rebellion. The humans had shown the galaxy that the Council's power came from fear, and once that fear was broken, the Empire began to crumble. High Archon Zelthara found herself in an emergency session that had lasted for weeks, as the Council's leaders tried to understand how their perfect empire was falling apart. The humans had infected the galaxy with something worse than any disease: hope. They had proven that the Council could be beaten, and that proof was spreading faster than their armies could move. The Zephyrian telepaths reported something even more disturbing. As they monitored rebel communications across the galaxy, they detected traces of human thought patterns in alien minds. The chaotic, contradictory nature of human consciousness was somehow contagious, spreading through contact and teaching other species to think in ways that the Council could not predict or control. Lord Commander Vakthos presented his latest tactical analysis with growing desperation. Human technology was improving at an exponential rate, far faster than any species in recorded history. They were not just copying Council equipment anymore. They were creating entirely new forms of technology, based on principles that seemed to violate established scientific laws. Human ships were appearing in Council space equipped with weapons that fired bullets made of compressed time, armor that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and engines that ran on what human scientists cheerfully called controlled impossibility. Their approach to physics was less like science and more like warfare against the universe itself. Nexari Prime Yulkasim reported the most troubling development of all. Human consciousness was somehow affecting the fundamental structure of reality. Wherever humans fought, the laws of physics became more flexible, more open to interpretation. It was as if their refusal to accept limitations was literally rewriting the rules of existence. The Council faced a choice that none of them had ever imagined they would need to make. They could continue fighting a war that was tearing apart their empire and possibly reality itself. Or they could do something that 10,000 years of absolute power had never prepared them for. They could surrender. But first, they had to find out if the humans would even accept their surrender, or if humanity had discovered something that the Council feared more than defeat: the joy of impossible victory and the intoxicating taste of bringing gods down from their thrones. The end came not with the roar of battle, but with a question that shattered 10,000 years of certainty. Dr. Elizabeth Harper stood in the ruins of the Nexus, the Council's great space station that human forces had captured after a siege that lasted 6 months. Around her, teams of human scientists worked alongside rebel engineers from dozens of species, all united by the same impossible goal: understanding how the universe really worked. The Council's leaders sat in what had once been their throne room, now converted into something between a laboratory and a courtroom. They were not prisoners exactly. The humans had made it clear that anyone who wanted to leave was free to go. But where could gods run when their worshippers had stopped believing? High Archon Zelthera looked older than her 3,000 years. The constant exposure to human mental patterns had changed her, forcing her to experience emotions that her people had abandoned millennia ago. Fear, uncertainty, and something that might have been curiosity flickered across her face as she watched the human scientists work. Lord Commander Vakthos had disconnected himself from the energy flows that had sustained him for centuries, sitting in a chair like any ordinary being. His attempts to use his powers in the final battles had failed spectacularly, when human interference made it impossible to focus the cosmic forces he had once commanded with ease. Nexari Prime Yulkasim existed in only 3 dimensions now, his reality-bending abilities disrupted by the strange effects that human consciousness had on local spacetime. He watched with fascination as human engineers dismantled equipment that his people had considered fundamental laws of physics. Dr. Harper approached them with a datapad in her hands and excitement in her eyes. She had spent the last month studying Council technology with the same reckless enthusiasm that had let humanity survive their first contact with godlike aliens. What she had discovered would change everything. "We know why you were afraid," she said, her words carrying across the vast chamber, where once only thoughts of cosmic significance had been shared. "We found your records, your real records, not the official histories." The Council leaders said nothing, but their body language spoke volumes. After 10,000 years of hiding from the truth, someone had finally found it. "You weren't the first galactic empire," Harper continued. "There were others before you, dozens of them. All of them fell the same way, destroyed by species that refused to accept limitations. You built your empire not because you were superior, but because you were terrified of being replaced." She activated her datapad, displaying images that the Council had thought were safely buried in the deepest archives. Ancient civilizations that had mastered technologies beyond current understanding. Ruins of worlds where impossible things had become commonplace. The bones of empires that had transcended every limitation except one: the arrival of someone willing to try the impossible. "You weren't gods," Harper said with the gentle voice of someone explaining a simple truth to children. "You were just the latest species to figure out how to cheat at the universe's rules, and like everyone before you, you got comfortable and stopped pushing boundaries." High Archon Zelthera finally spoke, her mental voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from us?" Harper smiled, and it was not the expression of a conqueror. It was the look of someone who had just discovered a new puzzle to solve. "We want you to help us figure out what comes next." The proposal was so unexpected that it took several minutes for the Council leaders to understand what they were hearing. Humanity was not interested in ruling the galaxy. They had no desire to become the new overlords of a million worlds. They wanted something far more dangerous. They wanted to keep exploring. Over the following days, the greatest minds of dozens of species gathered in the Nexus to work on projects that would have been impossible under the old order. Human scientists shared their techniques for violating scientific laws with Council researchers who had forgotten how to think beyond established limits. Rebel engineers combined their species' unique abilities with human innovation to create technologies that existed somewhere between science and magic. The first breakthrough came when a human physicist named Dr. James Martinez successfully convinced a council reality manipulator to help him build a device that could make theoretical mathematics become temporarily real. The resulting machine allowed them to test scientific theories by creating pocket universes where different physical laws applied. Within weeks, they had discovered 17 new forms of energy, 5 types of matter that had previously been considered impossible, and a form of mathematics that worked backward from effect to cause. Human questions combined with alien knowledge produced answers that neither group could have found alone. But the most important discovery was not technological. It was social. Working together, the various species began to develop new forms of communication that combined human emotional chaos with alien logical precision. They learned to think in ways that were both rational and intuitive, both controlled and creative. The galaxy began to develop a new kind of consciousness, one that embraced contradiction and possibility in equal measure. The old empire dissolved not through conquest, but through irrelevance. Why serve distant masters when you could join a community of explorers pushing the boundaries of what was possible? Why fight for territory when you could help discover new forms of existence that made traditional resources meaningless? Some of the Council's client species chose to leave, seeking isolation in the dark spaces between stars. Others joined the growing network of research stations and experimental worlds where impossible things happened on a daily basis. A few simply disappeared into dimensions that human-modified Council technology had made accessible for the first time. The humans, for their part, discovered that their greatest talent was not for destruction but for inspiration. They had a gift for making other species remember what they had given up in exchange for safety and certainty. They taught the galaxy to dream again, to question everything, and to treat the impossible as merely another problem waiting to be solved. 5 years after the fall of the Council, Dr. Harper stood in the observation deck of New Horizons Station, watching as teams of mixed species worked on their latest project, building a gateway to universes that operated on entirely different principles of existence. The project would probably fail. Most of their projects failed, but failure, they had learned, was just another word for interesting data. Behind her, the children of a dozen species played together in the station's gardens, their games involving toys that bent space-time and pets that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They spoke a mixture of languages that included concepts no single species could have developed alone, and their laughter contained harmonics that made reality itself seem more flexible. These children would grow up in a galaxy where the impossible was just another word for not yet discovered. They would push boundaries that their parents had never dreamed of crossing, ask questions that would redefine the nature of existence itself, and probably discover new ways to make the universe more interesting than it had ever been before. Council had feared nothing because they thought they had seen everything. Humanity had shown them the most terrifying truth of all. The universe was far stranger, far more wonderful, and far more full of possibilities than anyone had ever imagined. And the best part was that they had only just begun to explore it.